approaching 11 hours now of a long day. And forgive me, I want to go back to one of my early senators, Lindsey Graham. I think he asked you something, and I'd like to just put it this way. On a scale from 1 to 10, how deep is your faith? That I want to ask that question.
You're asking me, or
No,
you won't ask me?
I'm just joking.
Okay.
I won't ask you that. But I do want to go through some of the things that some of my colleagues did on Top Line. And forgive me, I don't want to dwell too much, but some of it I found today just to me really didn't hold water. And I want to start with my friend and colleague, Ted Cruz, who is my friend. He's a Texan. One of my favorite Texans is Brene Brown's, who says it's hard to hate up close, so pull people in. And a lot of times in this culture of tribal politics, the reality is we know each other, we get to know each other over years, and I've had the privilege of working with Ted on a lot of really good policy. So I went back to my office and re-listened to his questioning of you about critical race theory, and he referenced your speech, which I hadn't read. You Harvard folks are so well focused on these things, but I read your speech, and I was very surprised. Ted had a very big chart. I think he needs to give Senator Whitehouse some advice on charts. Senator Whitehouse's was very small. It was almost as if they were proportionate to their state sizes. But
Easy there, New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I would request that my colleagues in the Democratic Party would stop interrupting me. But he talked about your speech, and when I read your speech, there's a couple things that jumped out. First of all, he acknowledged it was a very powerful speech, very moving speech about extraordinary black women. I have a criticism. Your mother was not in it, but I will leave that alone. But there's some things he honed in on, almost as if they seemed to be accusations, which don't hold merit to me. We have a saying in New Jersey, I felt it was all hat and no cattle. And so he said that you called the woman who wrote the 1619 Project, that you called her provocative. That's not a compliment necessarily if you call someone provocative, is it?
No.
No, I mean, I think Ted Cruz is very provocative. And that doesn't mean I agree with what he's saying, his philosophy, doesn't mean I agree with his statements. But he pointed out you also called the author acclaimed. She won a Pulitzer Prize, correct?
She did.
In journalism. So she is acclaimed.
She is.
But in nowhere are you heralding her as this is reflective of your philosophy. That's true, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so I don't understand that at all. Part of his chart also was a lot of ellipses, skipping out things, but you mentioned critical race theory when talking about policies in general. I actually went back to that talk too, and I saw you threw everything in there. You were talking about psychology, economics, all different types of disciplines as touching upon the law. I think there was everything in there, I seem to be, except for astrology. But you understand that you were just listing a list of things that people could say touch the law. They weren't your philosophies at all.
Correct, Senator. And that speech was not related to what I do as a judge. That was talking about sentencing policy and all of the different academic disciplines that might relate to it.
Yeah, and then finally, we're entering an age that is surprising to me in American society where lots of books are being banned and lots of talks about books being read. You're on the board of a private school, and you have no supervision or authority over what books the children read in a private school, correct?
Correct.
I really do appreciate that. Jumping really quickly to a lot of talk today about these child exploitation cases. And Senator Durbin, I think that actually Josh Hawley used the word attack when describing his own, so I don't understand what that point of sensitivity was. But I individual cases, and we've now heard about two, you've presided over as a judge more than 10, 15 cases?
I've presided over 14 cases that involve child sex crimes, but over my career as a trial judge, I've presided over more than 100.
Right, and cases are heavily fact-specific, right?
That is true.
Did you remember all the facts of the case that Senator Hawley was?
I did not.
You did not, right. And the facts matter, right?
They do.
And as a judge, you're looking at all of the facts of the case, not just what might be talked about later or what people are honing in. You have to take everything into account and make a decision, correct?
Yes, that's what Congress has required judges to do.
Right, and just to clarify that Congress thing, because again, you went to this elite law school. I went to a gritty inner city law school, Yale. So you know this better than me, but it was actually 1984 that the sentencing laws, the sentencing standards were passed down, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, it was 1984. And then later in 2002 or 3, things were updated. But that 1984 was before the internet completely. And I just want to clarify also the Booker decision.
Yes.
Could you just clarify for the record, because my mom might be watching, no relation to me whatsoever, correct?
So the Booker decision, which earlier I mentioned that I thought Justice Scalia wrote
was
it. In
not
fact, it was Justice Stevens.
Yes.
But Justice Scalia concurred, so he had a separate opinion, and he had written a previous decision that was very similar.
Yes.
The Booker decision made the guidelines, the sentencing guidelines, advisory.
Why? Why would the Supreme Court, joined by some of the most conservative members, why would they do that?
Well, they determined that, in essence, the Booker, that if the guidelines were mandatory, that it would violate the right to a jury trial to have jurors decide every aspect of your sentencing.
Yeah,
So,
it's a sort of the separation of powers, Sixth Amendment.
Yes.
This is really important.
yes,
And so that gave judges latitude.
yes.
Now, if you were falling out of the norm, and this is where, I've now read conservative periodicals looking at this line of attack. That's not a negative pejorative. Again, my colleague himself used it, but this line of attack on you, I've seen conservative papers, liberal papers, mainstream papers, all say this doesn't hold water. And the reason is, and again, unlike Whitehouse and Cruz, I don't have a chart. I'm uncharted. But I would like to hold this up for you. You are well within the norm nationally for going below the sentencing guidelines because of this problem where you have this incongruency that judges on both sides of that have been pointed by people of both sides of the aisle have seen. I just want to make that very clear. You are well within the norm in the United States of America. I'm a former mayor, and one of my favorite mayor friends used to always say, "In God we trust, but everybody else bring me data." and so the data kind of shows that you're not some outlier. And forgive me, because you're not allowed to do this, but I kind of sat here and was a little insulted about the accusation that somehow this mother of two, confirmed 3 times by the United States Senate, who has victim advocacy groups writing letters for you, who has child victims advocacy groups supporting you, who has presided over fact-specific cases of the most heinous crimes, that somehow the implication that you are somehow out of the norm of other federal judges that we have confirmed where these issues have never come up, who, again, I held up this chart, but the majority of the decisions, a percentage of sentences below guideline range in non-production child pornography cases, in DC, 80% of them are under the guidelines. In Missouri, 77%. In Iowa, 62%. In North Carolina, 77%. In Nebraska, 81%. And so on and so on and so forth, down to Utah, alphabetical order, 71%. And so this implication that somehow your thoughtfulness on these very dense, fact-specific cases is somehow out of the norm, to me, does not hold up, doesn't head water. And then you add that to the endorsements that you have gotten from folks that deal with victim advocacy groups. It is, to me, just a line of attack that it does not hold in no way for me. I'm sorry. In the totality of your career, what you've accomplished and what you've done, I just think it's unfortunate that, unlike the sort of fair arbiters of this on both sides of the aisle who've dismissed it, I appreciate the way you've sat there and addressed all of that stuff. And that really brings me to the larger implication. You talked a lot about your uncles, one of them served in Baltimore, is that right? As a police officer?
My brother was a police officer in Baltimore.
The gentleman over there
Yes,
who volunteered to serve in the United States military?
yes,
And you have talked about that police work, right?
yes.
I live in Newark. I love my city. If you cut me, I bleed bricks. And the nickname of our city is Brick City. Your brother and I probably understand something. The majority of murder victims in the United States of America, do you know who the majority of murder victims are?
I don't.
They're black men. I imagine in your conversations with your brother and your two uncles, you who patrolled some of these streets, I imagine you feel in a different way about the anguish of what many communities of color struggle with when it comes to crime. Am I right there?
You are right, Senator. It is very anguishing, and it is something that I know all too well.
And you are a person that has that same fear that many mothers have for their daughters who do go out in this world. My mom used to say, when you have a child, it's like your heart going around outside of your body all of a sudden. And I just find it hard to believe, given your law enforcement background, you're a mom, that you take any of this urgency to keep America safe. And then I see that, like, folks I know well. I've worked with the FOP. I began negotiating with them. I have to say, I thought Jim Pasco, before I knew him, it's a whole thing, Brene Brown, bring people close. At first, I thought he was an ogre, biggest police union in I had some tough negotiations with my police union. He and I sat down and we shared our stories. And I think we realized we were coming from the same place when we were working on police reform. FOP endorsed you, and they wrote a powerful letter. I won't read it again. The IACP, they represent the largest, that's the rank and file, the FOP. The IACP represents the bosses, the managers. They endorse you. There's another group that maybe my colleagues don't know as well as I do. It's called Noble. Do you know them?
I do.
They're the black law enforcement organization nationally. People like your brother
Yes,
who love their communities,
yes.
who have seen, like I have, too many young men lying with bullet holes, bleeding into our pavements. These are folks who come from communities like your brother knows, where you too often see sidewalk shrines to murdered youth. I've talked to the women and men of Noble so many times. Anybody ever accuse them of being soft on crime? But they understand the complicated factors of crime in our country. And what they have to say to you about you, I won't read it, is just beautiful. Law enforcement family, mother of two, law enforcement organization after law enforcement organization, victims advocacy organizations after victims advocacy organizations, Republican appointed judges, Democratic appointed judges. That's who's in your corner. We're politicians. We have a sworn oath right now. I've just watched you with dignity and grace field what I can only imagine is behind those questions, is this doubt that is being sown. I just want America to know that when it comes to my family's safety, when it comes to Newark, New Jersey, or my state, God, I trust you. I trust you. Now, I brought in your mother, and I have to go back there. My mom has a saying that is awfully embarrassing when she talks about me. She says, she'll introduce me, and she'll say, behind every successful child is an astonished parent. But there's something about your mother, looking at her, is that she doesn't seem all too astonished. She seems like almost just very slyly she knew that a day like this might come. And so I just want to share with you that I have done a lot of hiring before I was in a legislative body, I ran New Jersey's largest city. And I could write a book about all the management mistakes I made in my first year and how it made me a really good manager. And the first mistake I made was I was just looking for the most talented, credentialed, skillful, smart people to help me run things. And I soon learned it wasn't enough. I made some mistakes in hiring. And I began to see that those skills, which you have a tremendous amount of, it's been said so many times, if stacking you up against other Supreme Court justices, you have more qualifications, more credentials than many of them. But I learned that you should hire first, that's necessary credentials, but not sufficient, that you should hire for character. That's what made me hire a great team in Newark eventually, and we operated so well. And so I believe I've gotten to know your character over these weeks, but I want America to know a little bit more about your character right now. And so I know my values. Booker T. Washington said it, James Baldwin said it. Children are never good at listening to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them. If I want to know your character, you haven't let me do this yet, but I want to hang out with your parents a little bit. And so let's draw them into this conversation. We won't swear them under oath, but just could you share with me what are their bedrock values that are most a part of your values now that you hope and pray are your grandchildren's, unborn grandchildren's values? What are those most important values you inherited from those two folk over there?
Thank you, Senator. I inherited a number of bedrock values, as you say, from my extraordinary parents. As I mentioned, my parents grew up in a time in this country in which Black children and white children were not allowed to go to school together. They persevered. They were the first in their families to go to college, to have that chance. They each went to historically Black universities, and they taught me hard work. They taught me perseverance. They taught me that anything is possible in this great country. And I think it came, as I said in my introduction, from the sea change that we had in this country from the 1960s when Congress passed 2 Civil Rights Acts and African Americans finally had the chance to become a part of the dream, become a part of the fabric of this wonderful nation. My parents moved to Washington, D.C. because this is where it all started for them in terms of having new freedoms. And I was born here on that hope and dream. I was born here with an African name that my parents gave me to demonstrate their pride in who they were and their pride and hope in what I could be.
And it seems to me, as a guy whose parents came here and you and I both were born here months apart, I would hear my parents' tough stories at the dinner table about facing bigotry. Here in the city, my father told me stories about his early jobs, but I never noticed a hint of bitterness or that hate he saw never generated hate with him. In fact, he just loved people, all people.
That is correct, Senator, and I would say that my wonderful parents went on to become extraordinary public servants. They had new opportunity. They could have done, other things, but each of them decided to give back to the community. My mother was in the public school system. She was a teacher and then became an administrator, became the principal of a magnet school for the arts in Miami, a new school that had started up, and became the sort of beloved principal of New World School of the Arts. And so many of her students continue to see me, meet me, and they know me from my mother, which is fantastic.
And she had diverse students.
She had extraordinarily
And she
diverse.
loved on all those children,
Everyone,
black, white, Asian.
everyone.
Well, let me ask you this, because I'm going to push you a little harder, because I have some people I really respect on the other side of the aisle, and they do. My friends and I talk about religion sometimes. Faith is important. I was teasing Lindsey, Senator Graham earlier, but I don't want to ask you anything specific about your faith except for this, because you brought it up in your opening statement, and I have to tell you, I don't think black women have any providence over struggle. People from all backgrounds in America struggle. But I do know often as the trailblazing black women, they have often faced many challenges being the first or being a trailblazer or breaking glass ceilings. But I know on your journey to this moment right now, you have faced very tough moments. Probably you've been knocked down by life. I always say if America hasn't broken your heart, you don't love her enough. You've been heartbroken by something, circumstance. You've been like Zora Neale Hurston, who says, I've been through sorrow's kitchen and I licked out all the pots. You've been like Langston Hughes to that poem, Mother to Son, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. Could you talk to me maybe about one moment or what you do when you get knocked down like that? Where do you get the grit and the guts to get back up and keep on going?
Well, Senator, I think that too is something that I learned from my grandparents, who, as I said, didn't have it easy. My grandparents, who didn't have a lot of formal education, but who were the hardest working people I've ever known, and who just got up every day and put one foot after the other and provided for their families and made sure that their children went to college, even though they never had those opportunities. I reflect on them in the context of this historic moment. I stand on the shoulders of people from that generation, and I focus at times on my faith when I'm going through hard times. Those are the kinds of things that I learned from my grandmother, who used to have those family dinners and bring us all together. And I think that's a common experience of Americans, that when you go through difficult times, you lean into family and you turn to faith. And that's part of my experience as well.
It's, I think, the experience of my colleagues and I on both sides of the aisle, leaning on that faith and that family. I want to give you, there's one thing about your opening statement, and I have to say, I haven't actually shaken your husband's hand yet, but yesterday I was mad at him because when he started tearing up at your remarks about him, it triggered, I don't really have it, but it triggered a sympathetic cry in me as well. So I'm a little upset at him, but I will deal with him individually. But you said something that I found provocative, to use that word one more time. And I felt afterwards, I reflected, I even talked to my staff about it, because I thought that statement, it didn't seem congruent to me. And it was, I don't know if it was a profession of humility or overly critical of yourself. But I want to end in my last 5 minutes giving you space to explain yourself to me, because much to my mom's chagrin, I am not a parent yet. And I'm looking at somebody that I admire. But you said something that struck me, because look, my mom was a working mom. And God, it was tough. My colleagues will not believe this, but there was a time I was very melodramatic, and I was in a bathtub of oatmeal bathtub, and my mom was getting ready to go on a business trip, and I look at her with these sad eyes, and I say, "Mom, if you leave me, I'll die." And she looked at me, knowing that you don't die from the chicken pox, but I still remember her going to the phone, having a long conversation, taking off her business suit and changing into her sweatpants. She would tell me later that was not a sign of love. She loved me, but a lot of women who love their kids can't stay home because we don't have paid family leave in this country. So you said in your opening remarks, that you haven't been as good of a parent, I think if I'm paraphrasing right, as good as a mom as you'd like to be. And I looked at your two girls, and I look at you, and I don't understand that statement. Could you maybe explain for me what you meant, and maybe take one more beat and explain to me what it means to you to be a mom of two young women growing up in America today?
Thank you, Senator. What I said in my statement was that that I had struggled, like so many working moms, to juggle motherhood and career. And it takes a lot of hard work to become a judge, to do the work of a judge, which I've done now for almost 10 years. You have a lot of cases. You don't have all that many resources, comparatively speaking, and it's a lot of early mornings and late nights. And what that means is there will be hearings during your daughter's recitals. There'll be emergencies on birthdays that you have to handle. And I know so many young women in this country, especially who have small kids, who have these momentous events and have to make a choice. You talked about your mom making the choice to make sure that she cared for you in that moment. And there are times when obviously you have to care for your family members. There are other times when there are events that you wish you could be a part of, but here's the emergency case that you have to deal with. And so I said in my opening that girls, you've had to deal with me juggling motherhood and job responsibilities, and I didn't always get the balance right. And so I would hope for them seeing me, hopefully you all will confirm me, seeing me moved to the Supreme Court, that they can know that you don't have to be perfect in your career trajectory and you can still end up doing what you want to do, that you just have to understand that there are lots of responsibilities in the world and that you don't have to be a perfect mom, but if you do your best and you love your children, that things will turn out okay.
Well, I'm sure your mom probably feels she wasn't perfect, but things have turned out okay. And I will tell you this. I'm sure they've said it, and if they haven't, I'm sure they will. The older I get, the more I appreciate my parents. I know they're proud of you, but as a guy who does have faith, and I sit at home in a room of my ancestors where I have generations of my ancestors' pictures up, and they're black folk and white folk. I have a very interesting family tree. I sit there to feel my ancestors sometimes and think about them. I hope right now in this questions and blistering that you know that at that desk there are a whole lot of spirits around you with their hands on you. Not only your children and your parents proud, but so are your ancestors. Mr. Chairman, thank you.